Hello, everyone. This is Michael Clark, host of the CCA's Leadership Development Podcast. This is our third segment with my guest on today's podcast, Melissa Chacko, Deputy Chief Actuary at the New York City Office of the Actuary. Melissa, for this last segment, I want to talk to you about your views on leadership. And when you think about people that you consider to be successful leaders, what traits do they have? How do they demonstrate their leadership?
I've seen varying models of leadership in my career. Some of it is, brute force, kind of like authoritarian, which doesn't seem to work too well over the long term. But what I find for successful leaders, in my point of view, people that I look up to, they're very strong in their mind. So, for instance, like if you were to criticize them, they wouldn't fall into pieces. They're very strong-minded, and they have strong like self-esteem and self-confidence, but not in like a boastful way. They're very humble people too, and people take them very seriously, and they have like a bigger picture in mind, and it's not about them, it's about kind of like serving others. And then I think that in terms of like demonstrating, I feel like I've seen actors or leaders who are very open, and they put a lot of trust into others, so that they're so suggesting that, you're very capable, you can do this yourself, I don't need to do it, you can do it. And by giving people confidence to do things, I feel like it's a very good trait of a leader.
So when you think about some of your role models when it comes to leadership, how have you tried to emulate their examples? And you listed off all of these great qualities of that leaders possess, or good leaders possess. Who are some of the people that you see model that, and how have you tried to emulate it?
So I've never tried to be someone else. I've looked to see what works and what you shouldn't do. Like you don't want to do something that clearly just doesn't work. And I see what does work, but I can't pretend to be someone else. So I try to make it my own in some way. And again, it's by being kind, it's being respectful, being humble, and just knowing like I don't know everything. If I don't know the answer, I just say I don't know the answer. Maybe we can try to figure it out together. I have no shame in asking a question that could potentially not be very smart. I don't have a problem with that.
Do you think that vulnerability limits your leadership in any way?
I don't think so. Sometimes I'll let you know that there's a lot of self-doubt, and there's got to be this part of you that kind of says it's okay, it's normal to feel that way. There's always that voice there that's kind of like the wise voice, and I don't think that I think it's a strength to be that way. And sometimes it's hard because it's kind of counterintuitive. You feel like, oh, I'm being so open, it's going to make me look bad. But in the end, it's good that you do that, because you did a good thing for yourself as well, to kind of show how you're feeling, show that you have emotions and you're a human being. And I think it also helps other people do the same, because then they feel like, oh, well, Melissa did it, maybe I could do it too, and I do find that people do share a lot more with me because I'm okay with that. I share the same things with them.
Yeah, no, I think that's excellent advice. I mean, especially when you consider, I really like what you said about how it's not about trying to mimic or mirror what somebody else does, but instead it's taking the concept and saying, how do I demonstrate that based on who I am and what my strengths and weaknesses and aims are as far as my own personality. I think that's maybe one of the more unique answers that I've gotten to that question, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Michael. And I feel like I didn't fully answer your question about, like some role models of mine. My sisters, for sure, and my mother. My mother kind of brought us up to be strong women, but also compassionate, so like kind of bringing both together. So I think she was really successful at that. And also, they're still there. They are a sounding board, part of my sounding board. I can talk to them, get their thoughts, because they're professionals also. And they know how it is as a woman of color, they're young women of color. And so they understand like the potential difficulties that one could face, and they give advice, and I tell them what my plans are. And they can be brutally honest because we're siblings, but always because they know who I am. It's always like this fundamental level of respect for each other that we have. So it's like such a safe space to make a mistake, to ask for advice, to be vulnerable, because it's my family. So that's, a big part of my arsenal of role models. But also in terms of actuaries, Robin Simon, who was the former chief actuary for Buck, she was phenomenal. She was so smart, so intelligent. And I think what set her apart, like, she's a legend, people could still talk about Robin. She's passed on, but she's done so much for Buck and even just for the industry. And I think for her, she would show her vulnerability. It was like so many times she would be like, I don't know, I felt like really alone when no one contributed to that call. She would say things like that. So she didn't come off as like, I know everything, I'm a tough woman. And she was a tough woman, but at the same time, also gentle, but so smart and firm, but still kind and loving. And we wanted to make sure that everyone that came towards her knew what they were talking about, or learned something, could take something away, and be better the next day. And I guess the last one, but I mean, there are so many. I have so many people that I look up to, but one of them is Sherry Chen. So Sherry was my former boss, former client, former boss, now my friend. And she's so smart, so strong. And I learned a lot from her in terms of even how she prepares, how she has all these creative ideas. And she's very much just like accepting of her strengths, her weaknesses, and everyone else's strengths and weaknesses too. And she really has so much respect for the industry and for other women and minorities. And it's just like an inspiration.
No, those are excellent examples. I appreciate you sharing that. I actually, before we jumped on to record this podcast, I happened to be reading an article on a Harvard Business Review about in successful, inclusive leaders, and like the number one thing that it says is that they can be vulnerable, right? It's not just a hard line their way or the highway, that they know everything. It was about that ability to say, hey, I don't know, or hey, I made a mistake here, or this is a weakness that I have, and being open about that, and actually didn't lend itself to them losing credibility, and instead they gained credibility from it and created a more inclusive environment. So I think those examples that you highlighted there are spot on and very consistent with what other people have said about inclusive leadership.
And one other thing I wanted to add is that, I was mentioning that there's a lot of oftentimes like self-doubt, which a lot of people have, everyone has, but, there's that voice that comes in to kind of comfort you. And one thing that, sometimes I feel like, oh, why did I say that? That was not very smart. I don't feel smart. Like all those kind of critical voices that say those things to kind of maybe bring you down. I don't know. But one thing that helps me is by saying to myself, I don't need to prove that I'm smart, because I'm here because I am smart. So I don't need to continue to prove that I'm smart. I'm here because that is the case. So if I do have to ask a question, it's not because I or the fact that I don't ask the question because I don't want to look stupid. That it's almost like it doesn't matter at this point. You ask the question because you want to better the product. You want to make sure that you're answering all questions or considering everything that you need to consider. It's less about you now. It's more about the larger picture.
Is there a way that you frame those type of questions that has helped you feel more comfortable asking those type of questions, so that you don't have that voice in your head doesn't come out ultra critical and prevent you from asking a question? Like, how do you go about asking those questions where you might otherwise be worried that, oh, this is a hey duh, there's a obvious answer for this, but yet you still need to ask it because you don't know the answer to it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I ask people to double check me, or I mean, I have this one situation where I have to do this calculation, and I feel like it's such a simple calculation, but yet I am not fully confident, and I've done it multiple ways. So my strategy in terms of asking the question. And like I said, I'm not afraid of looking like I don't know what I'm talking about. So what I do say, and what I always recommend other people do in my group, is like, look, this is how I've approached it. This is what I'm thinking. And I would love for you to, like a second pair of eyes, or I would love to get your point of view or your thoughts because of your experience with this. Like, what do you think that this is a reasonable thing? And I think it's reasonable because of X, Y, and Z, but, I'd really love your take on it. And then because of that, you have different opinions, different thoughts. And at the end, it's like all for the greater product,
Yeah.
making
No,
sure like we're all on the same page. So in
mhm.
the end, it's kind of like, oh, it's like a combination of multiple things where we all contributed and collaborated. And now like this product is like shiny like a diamond, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's one of the benefits in working in a team environment is that if you can create that culture where you can be the first to admit that, hey, I've done something, but I know that other people can come in and help improve upon it, such that when we get to the end of the result or whatever it is that we're delivering, that we can feel really comfortable, confident, and proud of what we created, knowing that it was a team effort.
Yeah. And everybody's on the same page, no surprises, no, well, I didn't know about that, or, I didn't agree to that, or everyone's like, yeah, that's basically what we all came up against. And we are smart people. We came together and this is our decision and it's justifiable. It's just a strong argument, stronger with multiple people's opinions and
Yeah,
views.
and the quality of whatever that end product is, right, ends up being superior to what it would be as if it was just you,
Mhm.
right, yourself, which does require some ego to be left at the door when somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I've looked at what you've done, and here is another way to think of it that I think improves upon it," and you've got to be
Yeah.
okay with it, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's also another part. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but for leaders, to be humble, I feel like it's so easy to get a big head. And I feel like as soon as you get a big head, then someone pops it and then you feel like you don't feel very good about yourself. So I feel like just staying humble, just knowing that you don't know everything is just really important. And I think it's just easier to be like that, not to pretend like you're some god when you're just like a regular human being.
I'll go back to something you said, talking about having sounding boards, right? It's really important that you establish those type of relationships, not only with your teams, but I like the concept of having those people that you can go to where you're going to get their honest feedback, right? The last thing you want, especially if you're in more of a leadership position, is to go to your team and say, "Hey, I put this together. Can you look at it critically and come back to me with your feedback?" The thing that I always hate if I give that to my team, if they come back and say, "Nope, this all looks good," I'm like, "Come on, you really didn't look
Yeah.
at it. I want you to be brutally honest with me and tell me
Mhm.
where this thing has shortcomings."
Yes. I really do appreciate the people that do that because that's what I want. I want to know, yeah, I tried my best and, I hopefully it's a good product, but I know it can be better,
Mhm.
and I want to make it better. Let's just do this together and be stronger together.
Yeah, yeah, and well, and the same thing with the sounding boards, right? You want those people that are going to be loving but brutally honest with you about situations and scenarios to help you understand, hey, you could have done better here, or hey, you probably were being too narrow in your focus here, and this is what you're experiencing is the result of having too narrow of a focus or not viewing the bigger picture.
Right. Right. And then also kind of just taking it and seeing it as a positive rather than it like being a criticism on your character. And it's not, it's just more of about the product or about the work or opportunities for learning and things like that.
That's what I was going to go back to for those that didn't listen to the first segment. Highly encourage you to do that because I think that's maybe the all-encompassing theme from our discussion is just that you have to be willing to learn at any stage of your career to be a successful leader, to be successful in what you're doing day to day, in your relationships with people. Taking the time and putting in the time and effort to learn, I think, ultimately leads to success.
And I guess, success is defined in so many different ways for different people. And for me, I feel like I'm successful when I've really tried my best and I've made a difference. You know, it's not necessarily about the money. It's not necessarily about the kudos. It's just about the fact that, you know, we did something and it was like the best product and like the best intention. And, you know, for me, I'm like, yeah, you know, and I'm encouraging people to do the same. That's, you know, for me, that's success.
No, I love that. In fact, a lot of this leadership section and the questions that I ask people on this podcast are usually the same questions, but I'm adding to that now and adding exactly what you just said, which is how do you define success? I think that's an important, it's important backdrop and understanding for people when they define effective leaders, right? Is what is a successful outcome, or what does success look like to them? So I appreciate that. When you look at successful future leaders within the actuarial profession specifically, what are the imperatives? What are the things that they need to be able to master, or at least be learning?
So I'd say that, of course, you know, to stay abreast of, you know, what's happening in the industry, going to conferences and meeting other actuaries and networking and all that other good stuff. But specifically when it comes to leadership and working with others, I feel like, you know, as the times change, and you need to also change. You know, you kind of have to go with the times. You know, back in the day when I first started working, it was very brutal. And, you know, to me, leadership was like almost like an enemy sometimes, you know?
Hmm.
And now that I'm at that level, I don't want it to be that way. You know, I want it to be more of like community, more like helping each other, things like that, and giving each other um, like the trust and the encouragement to just do what they do. You know, so many times I'm like, you do it. I trust you. You know, even if you're new, I know you can do it. Let's work together. I won't let you fail. You know, things like that. I think that having that type of desire to want to improve or change with the times is key, because people are changing too. Next generations, the people that we've hired here are so different compared to my colleagues from 20 years ago when we just started working, you know?
Hmm.
And it could be that people are more sensitive, they're more aware, they have different types of knowledge. You know, it's so different. You cannot use that same archaic model on people today. So I think it's about staying up to date on all of those trainings about unconscious bias and, you know, about different leadership types, because each person needs to be, well, you have to be a different type of leader for different people, you know? Some
Hmm.
people hands off, some people hands on. It's very different for each person. And just to be aware that that type of thing exists is very important.
That reminds me of a discussion we had as part of the Leadership Development Community's TED Talk podcast club. I don't remember the specific podcast or TED Talk that we were discussing, but we came up with this like alternative definition of leadership as one of somebody that can be a facilitator. And I think everything you're describing is that, right? It's facilitating growth and development for people, which looks very different depending on the person or the people that you're working with.
Right. And it's really just because we're all so different. Every single person is different. So, I mean, naturally, you would think each person has a different style. And, you know, if we're trying to develop the future leaders, then we need to be good examples and set good examples and show them what works, what could work, different models. And then that's what they could model their own leadership skills after.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's great. Melissa, I want to thank you for joining our Leadership Development Community podcast. Appreciate you spending some time with us. Just as a reminder, the Leadership Development Community is open to any actuary. You can reach out to the CCA to join and join us for upcoming CCA events, and follow us online and social media along with the CCA's website, ccactuaries.org. Melissa, thanks again for joining us, and until
Thank
next
you.
time.